Welcome to this week's edition of Flashback Friday, your opportunity to get some good review by listening to episodes from the past that Jason has handpicked to help you today in the present and propel you into the future. Enjoy.
Speakers, publishers, consultants, coaches, and info marketers unite. The Speaking of Wealth Show is your roadmap to success and significance. Learn the latest tools, technologies, and tactics to get more bookings, sell more products, and attract more clients. If you're looking to increase your direct response sales, create a big-time personal brand, and become the go-to guru, the Speaking of Wealth Show is for you. Here's your host, Jason Hartman.
Welcome to today's show. This is Jason Hartman, your host, and as you may or may not know, every 10th show we kind of do a special tradition here that originated with my Creating Wealth show, where we do a topic that is actually off topic on purpose, something just to do with general life and more successful living, and that's exactly what we're going to do today with our special guest. Again, 10th show is off topic, and it is very much intentional, just for personal enrichment, and I hope you enjoy today's show. And we will be back with our guest in just a moment. It's my pleasure to welcome Tom Asacker to the show. He's written several books, the latest of which is entitled The Business of Belief: How the World's Best Marketers, Designers, Salespeople, Coaches, Fundraisers, Educators, Entrepreneurs, and Other Leaders Get Us to Believe. He's also the author of a book quite a while back entitled Sandbox Wisdom. You may have come across that one before, and it's a pleasure to have him on the show today. Tom, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Jason, for having me.
Good. I always like to give our listeners a sense of geography. Where are you located?
I'm about an hour north of Boston in beautiful Exeter, New Hampshire.
Fantastic. Well, it must be gorgeous with the leaves changing, right? I think it's about 30% right now, the foliage, right?
Yeah, well, it was cool this morning, so the foliage should be coming rapidly now.
Good stuff. Well, tell us a little bit about your latest book, and it's just released a few months ago, I guess, and the reviews on Amazon are incredible. They are many, and they are positive.
Yeah, totally unexpected, to tell you the truth. I got into this approach to writing this little book based on some experiences I had with people business clients and people who told me that they understood and agreed with me on particular directions to take in life. And when I bumped into these people months later, they had done the opposite. So it created this real puzzle in my mind and that I had to figure out, which was, if people don't take action based on their understanding of something, then why do they take action? And I did a deep dive into human motivation to try to find out what that concept is called. And the only thing I could find was this concept called belief. So that in essence is the answer to the puzzle. People do what they do because they believe that that's the right thing for them in that moment.
That's really interesting. So they don't do what they understand. Is that what you said? It was an interesting statement you made about, 6 sentences ago maybe. They don't do what they understand, they do what they believe. They don't act in a way that is logical, or what do you mean by that?
Well, that's one of the things that the mistakes that we make is that we compare the human brain to a computer, and we imagine that people make decisions based on a set of programs or logic, and it's not true. Now, it's also not true that people are, quote unquote, irrational, because rationality as a human being is based on my personal desires. So if I do something, to you it may look irrational, but to me it may be perfectly rational. So most people will say, well, what you're saying, Tom, is that people are irrational. And I'm saying, no, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is people make their decisions based on this complex mixture in their own mind of all kinds of things what their personal narrative is and whether or not this decision is enhancing that narrative, how much of a hurry they're in, and whether or not it makes sense to even contemplate the decision, what type of mood they're in, and whether or not the decision is going to make the mood better or worse. So there are all kinds of things that go into decision making. And what frustrates people that are trying to get other people to make decisions that are beneficial to them and their work and their businesses is they don't understand how this works. So they'll end up getting frustrated and saying people are irrational.
Yeah, so that's interesting. And people making decisions with their own personal narrative, and you didn't mention mood, but I guess that's part of the narrative at that particular time. So the real challenge is then, when I saw the title of your book without knowing anything about it, I thought two things. Well, is this a religious book? Is it a Christian book? Or is it about a company, great companies like Apple Computer, for example, or Harley Davidson, where they have these this cult following? So the question is, how do we, as leaders, what do we do? Do we help people change the narrative or get them to see that this is in what we want to motivate them to do in keeping with their personal narrative? Or what is the translation? How do we make that leap?
Right. That is a great question. And I was worried a bit myself about using the word belief on the cover because, again, people do conjure up a religious aspect or overtone to the book based on that word. And I'm not really sure why. And I think it's because we don't understand the concept of belief well enough. See, every decision that we make in life is made based on belief. It's not based on a total information package, for example. If we're walking, if we're taking a hike on a trail in the woods and we see a footbridge, we have absolutely no idea if that footbridge is going to hold us or not. No engineer has given us some results of tests that they've done. We look at the bridge and we form a belief based on past experiences with similar looking bridges. Well, every decision that we make in life is like that. The human brain goes into memory. It finds similar things that match what we're perceiving in our environment, and then we make predictions based on those memories. So that is belief. It's not this deeply held dogmatic type of response to something. It is just the way the brain works. And so to your point, if that's true, then what do leaders do that want people to believe? And again, I list marketers as leaders. People who design things are trying to get people to use these new products or services. Salespeople are trying to move people to believe in something and make a decision that's favorable to them and their work. So how do they do that? They understand that people are motivated by their desires. They feed those hungers and desires not with just information. Information is a good way of backing it up, but they do it with aesthetics. They do it with storytelling that enhances people's own narratives. So you need to understand what people are currently experiencing and feeling, what their desires are, and then you have to help move them to a place in the future where those desires become realized. I mean, isn't that what financial planning is all about? So, I mean, it's a simple analogy, but that's true of everything that we do.
Sure. Yeah, and you mentioned storytelling. I mean, there's been a lot of talk throughout the ages of the power of storytelling. And, I guess one of the reasons storytelling is such a powerful form of communication is that it does, it's kind of like in the old-fashioned sales, the feel, felt, found close. You may have heard of that.
Yes.
And that's really what a story is. It's like even Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey concept is, well, this person went out and they weren't sure of the situation, and then they dove in and they experienced trouble, but they finally came out the other end victorious.
Exactly.
That's really what a story does. Is it maybe relates to the narrative, right?
Well, it moves our mind,
and it moves the narrative too.
Right? Yeah, because we don't think in data. That's the problem with people feeding us information via data and charts, and we don't think that way. We think by piecing together information to create a story, to create a metaphor or a narrative or something. So when I talk about story, I don't mean necessarily that someone should say, well, once upon a time this happened to me. Not necessarily. It may just be giving people little cues so that when they look at it, they make a story. I'll give you a perfect example. I just got back from Vegas, and I was telling them a little story out there about how when I checked in to my hotel room, there was a triangle folded into the toilet paper in the bathroom. And what that triangle does is it makes you conjure a story of cleanliness. It tells you to do that. So you do. Your mind just goes off and says, okay, somebody must have cleaned the bathroom and made the beds. And in fact, what they may have done is just folded a triangle in the toilet paper.
Right. Yeah.
Or Apple's little boxes that you open up and it looks like a jewelry box. That tells you a story about the quality of care that the company put into the product itself.
I don't know where this quote came from, but I have often driven my employees crazy with it because I think it's such a brilliant quote. And from just a guess and memory, maybe a mixture of the two, I'm guessing some airline executive in the 70s probably said it, but it goes like this. And it relates to what you're saying, because I was a real stickler for having our office always very clean and nice. And I would always say to the staff, coffee stains on the flip-down trays mean we don't maintain the jets properly.
Oh, absolutely.
That's your triangle story on the toilet paper, It's the same thing. Okay, so what our mind does is it takes a sample, that footbridge concept of we don't know if the bridge will hold up, but we have these other examples of them holding up previously, because probably if we're about to cross that bridge, we're not going to make it we're not going to be alive to know, right, to do the next bridge. So the mind takes a small thing and it expands on it then, right?
Exactly. Yes, it connects. It finds dots in the mind. So look at the mind like a big connected dots puzzle. So your brain sees something and it creates a dot in the mind, and it looks in the mind and it sees other dots. And then it will connect those dots. It'll string them together, and it'll create a picture. And that picture is what it uses to make a prediction. Now, I can tell you, just because it makes a picture doesn't mean that picture is accurate. But it's just what the brain does. For example, let's say that you buy this bracelet to play golf and you want it to help you swing because you think that the ions in the bracelet help your golf swing. So you wear the bracelet, all of a sudden you're hitting the ball straighter. So now you've made a cause and effect relationship in your mind between the ions in the bracelet and your golf swing, when in fact that band could have done nothing more than made your mind slow down and consciously think about your swing, which improved your swing. So that's the nature of the mind. It will create a story, whether or not the story makes any sense at all. And that's why we have superstitions and everything that we have in the world.
Right. Yeah, very interesting. So can you give us any examples, Tom, of how this is used in the business environment? I mean, we've alluded to a few, but, any more examples like that of how someone who's trying to get customers or staff motivated toward a certain vision can use the business of belief?
Well, everyone out there that has customers has achieved belief with those customers. And typically it goes through a certain steps, which, by the way, are opposite than a lot of steps that business people and others, leaders, take. So the steps are really simple. The first step is perception, right? We are visual creatures. Our eyes and mind and senses are turned on by what we see, by aesthetics, by a sensory pleasure and sensory stimulation as well. The very next thing that happens is that our feeling mind gets either turned on or turned off by this sensory perception. To your point, we see dirty trays and seat pockets. We think they didn't do a good job maintaining the airplane. There's nothing logical about that connection between the dirty seat pockets and airplane maintenance.
Well, I mean, really?
No, there's not, because the people who tighten up the nuts underneath the airplane, they're not the same people that clean the seat pockets. But we make that connection, right?
But the people that manage both of those crews that is the same.
Well, I understand what you're saying. I do. But that is in essence my point, is that we perceive something and then we have this feeling and then we make assumptions based on that feeling. And now here's the third thing that happens that people miss. We immediately start looking for and filtering information to justify the feelings that we have. We will start looking for evidence to rationalize those feelings. So if you want to lead someone, you start with their senses, you appeal to their feeling mind, then you give them the backup information so that they can rationalize what that feeling mind wants to do. And then when they take the action, when they walk across the bridge and it doesn't collapse, they have now formed a belief. And once that belief is formed, it's very powerful because we don't have a lot of time during a day to reevaluate every belief we have. We can't walk through a supermarket with 50,000 different brands and flip around and look at the label of each one of these to see which 30 brands we're going to purchase when we get there.
Well, much less go to the factory and make sure that the food is properly prepared and cleaned and the stuff that goes into the can you buy.
No, isn't that a great point? I mean, think about it. When we buy something and we see the color and the label and all of that, logos, we make an assumption of what's inside that thing. We have no idea really what's in there, but we make an assumption based on past experiences in the marketplace.
In a highly specialized economy, and the more specialized any economy becomes, and the more specialized civilization becomes, there's a lot more belief and trust that is involved, right? I mean, think about it. If we were living in caves, we would maybe only depend on our own actions and the actions of a few other people. Like one person's going to be responsible for starting and maintaining the fire. Another person, another couple of people are going to go hunt. And another is going to prepare the food. And another is going to take care of the baby. But nowadays, the amount of trust or belief, and distinguish between those two words, if you would, if you'd like to, is incredible. I mean, we've got to trust huge infrastructures that rely on thousands and thousands of moving parts every single day of our life, right?
Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head. If you think about the number of new products and services, new brands that are being released yearly, we have learned over time that it is impossible for us to evaluate all of these products and services. So we basically run on our instincts. It's true with everything. And we can't really think too deeply about all of that because we'd be paralyzed. We don't have the cognitive ability to do that. So to your point, we simply trust. Or as I like to say, we believe, right? Because belief comes typically before trust. Belief comes first. So I believe based on past experiences with similar things. I trust because I made the choice, and that choice has not let me down over time. So now I'm building actual trust.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but that's why you're seeing, frankly, an outpouring of new products because we live in a world where we're free to choose what we believe. And we have this desire for stimulation, and self-expression. So before you know it, we're buying dishwashing, liquid because it's in an aesthetically pleasing looking plastic bottle that better reflects who we are.
So, I mean, what's your commentary on that, though? Is that okay or not?
I think it's kind of exciting, really. I mean, if you think about it, the opportunities are limitless. Now, what I don't find okay is that this fragmentation is also occurring in our beliefs about not just marketplace choices like soap, but also in things like governing. And I think that's what causes a lot of issues, is because people are reluctant to compromise They look at their beliefs and they say, no, I want my beliefs to be the ones that play out in whatever is going on. So they resist compromise. They resist taking in information which conflicts with their views and their feelings. So there is an issue with that, the fact that we can self-select information now as opposed to everyone getting the same stuff through mass media. It's pluses and minuses.
Right. The media fragmentation concept has really, it's divided people a lot. Whereas in the 50s, you have 3 magazines, Life, Look, and Time,
right.
And you had three networks, NBC, ABC, CBS. Now you've got a zillion media outlets and a zillion places to get your news on, alternate news, conspiracy theories, mainstream stuff, which might be the biggest conspiracy of them all, frankly, but there's my belief.
I'm with you.
And yeah, it really does divide people. But the fact that all of these brands, like you mentioned a few minutes ago, you see all of these new brands coming out every year. I mean, really, this is a huge testament to either one of two things, positive or negative. Either the marketers have figured out the formula for the business of belief, or we have just become, and maybe justifiably so trusting or so believing that we can pick up a jar of peanut butter at the store, this kind one week, another kind the next week, and another kind the week after, and none of them are going to kill us, and we're going to be pretty safe with all of our choices. Or are we just thinking that, okay, is it the government that's making sure we're okay? What does the consumer think?
I don't think we think. And that's part of how people negotiate their way through the marketplace. It's understanding the fact that they're not doing a lot of thinking about this. Or if they do, to your point, they're saying, well, if I'm buying this from this supermarket, I'm sure they have quality control procedures, because if something happens to me, I'll sue the supermarket and they'll go under. So they're smart enough to have control mechanisms in place to prevent all that from. I don't know how exactly we tease out this trust in things that we've never tried before. But I'm sure it's not us saying that we believe the government is protecting us, because it's impossible. It's impossible for the government to test all this products.
Yeah, of course it is. And I mean, we know that the government is not necessarily on our side. I mean, look at the NSA, right?
Right.
The government is maybe our worst enemy. I don't know. You ask George Orwell.
You know what it is? I think it's interesting. I think it's just I think we're all in this thing together for ourselves, if you know what I mean by that. Right? So we're doing the right things so that we continue to grow. So that the organizations want to continue to grow, we want to continue to have choice and to grow. So I think by being selfish in our pursuits, that for some crazy reason it all works.
Yeah, it really does all work. And I mean, I'm sure we'd both agree that brands are really just a form of shorthand. They're a way for people to make decisions without research, make decisions quickly. And when you look at a company like Apple, every time they release a new product, of course, there are the critics out there. It's interesting on the new iPhone that everybody's now, that apparently the fingerprints are going to be shared with the NSA. Before they said they wouldn't be, and I don't know, it's who the heck knows. And so there's certainly some critics out there, but by and large, they know they can release a new product and sell millions and millions of copies of that product because everybody just knows that Apple brand is quality.
That's right. Yeah. Now as well, they become part of the zeitgeist. So there are a lot more critics, right? The expectations of Apple
are higher.
Right. And that's what is affecting, for example, their stock price. It has nothing to do with their actual performance. It's, wait a minute, we expected,
we wanted more. Yeah. Well, yeah. It's like we're all spoiled children too, So,
well, that's the problem with giving people more.
Those last two meetings, I tell you, I was unimpressed, and I kept asking, have they lost it? Since Steve is gone. I mean, it's just unimpressive. the last two announcements.
I understand.
But Tom, one more side of this. Maybe we can just flip it around, and then I'd like to, if we get time, to ask you about Sandbox Wisdom or any of your other books for a moment. But What happens when things go wrong? And for some reason, I'm thinking of the Susan G. Komen Planned Parenthood debacle that happened, was it a year ago now or a little less than a year? What happens when something goes wrong? Or, we talked about Apple, the antenna on the first major iPhone redesign, which I think was the 4. They kind of swept that under the rug. Nobody really knows. They said it was a software thing. What happens when things go wrong and a brand loses some of its luster? How do you fix it? Is it hard to lose? What are some of the things we should be thinking about as business people?
Well, I think the most important part is to recognize that your present customers have to an extent, it depends again what the product is, but to an extent, their identity is tied up in that brand in one way or the other because they're choosing it rather than choosing, alternative products or services. So if something happens, this is not just, we had a quality problem, right? I mean, Harley-Davidson almost went bankrupt because of their quality issues, but they turned that all around. And while they turned it around with great quality, they also worked to build the identity of the people who are passionate about Harley. And that gave those people even more ability to tell their story as Harley owners about great quality that they had as well as the image that they had. So can you turn things around? You can, but you have to recognize that you've got to turn around the business, the organization in a way that makes the people who stuck with you feel smart that they stuck with you. You have to enhance their identity. In other words, they don't want to be appeased, right? Don't send me the coupon. It's not about that. Let me in on what's going on. I want to understand how things are being fixed because belief is about the future. And in order to believe something about the future, you have to have signs, specific evidence that you're moving to this better place in the future. Appeasement doesn't do that. So they want the inside scoop. What is going on? And can I believe that? Show me evidence that we're going to get there. And if you can do that, you can bring people back on board because they want to believe.
Yeah, right. It's really as if the company has captured the ego of that consumer, and now they're invested in it. And you see this, in the political world, probably it's the most pronounced, where you can put every piece of evidence in front of somebody, and no, man, they will not listen.
Exactly.
Because their ego is tied up in that brand, that politician.
Well, all of their decisions have been tied up in it. In addition, someone's painting a picture of the future, and the picture that they're looking at makes them fit in the future. They can see themselves being successful in the future. They can see their opinions being, well held by others in the future. But if they look at another picture of the future, they might not see themselves that way. So they latch on to that picture of the future that makes them feel the best about themselves, where they are today and their potential for where they're going to be. And they have a hard time letting that go. That's why the best thing a leader can do is paint a picture that will take everybody to the same place in the future, collectively.
Any thoughts about when leaders talk about vision and the future and getting there and so forth? Are there any thoughts on that time frame? Like, how far out can you make that vision or that goal? Where, in other words, where does a person lose interest? Like, this is just too far away to even worry about right now. What's the distance there that you can get people to go? You probably have to have them do it in small increments, right?
Yeah, I don't know if it's as much a factor of how far away that future is, rather than how vividly can you paint that picture and how frequently you give evidence that you're making progress towards that vision. That's the key, right? Because if you set the vision way out
And there's no progress.
Right. And you don't give them signs of progress, people become disenfranchised very quickly.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Yeah, very, very good point. Very interesting stuff. Hey, do you have any time to tell us about Sandbox Wisdom or any of your other books?
Well, I can tell you that Sandbox Wisdom really started for me as a belief, and I'm going to tell you, belief for entrepreneurs, much of it is self-delusion, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but entrepreneurs, artists, athletes, they create this vision of where they're going to be in the future, and that desire to be that thing, to arrive at that place, to do whatever that thing is, that drives them to do that. I mean, it's just like a self-fulfilling prophecy, but there's nothing that says that they should be able to do that. I mean, if you talk to most people that I've seen that have done breakthrough things, the experts said, no, that's impossible. They can't do that. It was this person's belief. So that happened to me. I mean, I remember sitting unemployed after I had like this vision collision with some partners at a business that I was running. And it was probably mid-morning. I'm sitting in a bathrobe staring into a cup of coffee. And I glanced over, and my daughter had a spoon. She was sitting eating cereal, and she had a spoon, and she was looking at the spoon, at her image, and then she flipped it around, and she raised her eyebrows. And I looked at her. I said, Andrea, what are you doing with the spoon? And she said, Daddy, how come if I look at the spoon this way, I'm right side up, but if I flip it over, I'm upside down? Now, the only thing that could come to my mind at that time was the words convex and concave. But I had no idea how to explain to her how that happens. And in my mind at that time, I said, you know what? This reminds me of business people. A lot of them know a lot of big words, but they really don't understand the lives of the people that they serve. So I'm going to write a business book about an executive who loses his way in business. He rediscovers it through the eyes of a little girl, and he turns everything around, his creativity, his passion, innovation. And believe me, I was completely deluded. And I said, I'm going to go publish this book. So I got a couple of rejection letters with this little book. I said, the heck with it. I took what little money I had left. I printed 10,000 copies, and I started mailing them to every CEO in the country. And the next thing you know, the book takes off. And it was only because I had deluded myself into believing that I could do this. I was really driven to see this thing through. And that's what made it happen. And that's why I'm here talking with you today.
I love that point you make about how entrepreneurs suffer from self-delusion, and, in a good way, because it reminds me of that old saying, those who say it can't be done should never interrupt the people actually doing it.
Exactly.
That's how all greatness was achieved. And Tom, it's really a question of who has got the stronger will. Is it the person who believes in this self-delusional future, whether it be getting to the moon or inventing a new smartphone or whatever the impossible quote unquote thing is, or is it the naysayers, the people who say it can't be done? Who's got the stronger belief? It's just the war of belief systems, right?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, there are two sides to what I call the bridge of belief in the book. One side is desire. So there's something over there that you want to achieve, to accomplish, a statement that you want to make. The other side of the bridge is comfort. You don't want all of this change in your life. You don't want to risk what you have. You don't want to disrupt the status quo that makes you comfortable, that you've got figured out. You see this tension in organizations everywhere. Why don't companies who pioneered products, why don't they take us into the future? Why is it always some other entrepreneur that had nothing to do with that particular segment of the market? Because those companies were comfortable, and they didn't want to lose that comfort.
Well, the most dangerous moment comes with victory, right? That's when everybody gets complacent.
Hey, listen, Jerry Seinfeld, I heard him on the Howard Stern show. He said that success is the enemy of comedy. You get comfortable and you don't want to go out and try new routines.
Right. Yeah, got to be challenged. I wonder if it's maybe a healthy idea for entrepreneurs to almost put themselves in situations where they'll almost intentionally confront naysayers so that they can sharpen and strengthen their belief system and say, look, this guy says it can't be done. Damn it, I'm going to do it just to prove him wrong. I mean, we've all felt that way before, right?
Yeah, well, usually they have such a burning desire and vision of whatever it is that they're not listening to anyone anyway. I can remember when I owned this medical device company, people were telling me that what we were doing was impossible to do. I had a patent examiner at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office told me on the telephone, what you have submitted is impossible. And I had a patient using it. I had to fly to D.C. and bring this thing with me to have this person actually see that it wasn't impossible.
And did you explain to the examiner, this is why you have a dumb government job in a cubicle, and this is why I'm an entrepreneur?
So that's one of those things about belief. See, I wanted her to believe, so I had to figure out how to understand what her feelings were and make her feel good about herself. Otherwise, I never would have got the
patent. Listen, I couldn't agree more.
But was I thinking that, Jason?
Yeah,
absolutely, I was thinking.
Yeah, it's funny. Good stuff. Well, Tom, give out your website and tell people where they can find your books and find out more about you.
Well, the best place to go is just go to thebusinessofbelief.com, and that will land you right on a page with information about the book with a link to Amazon, but it'll also have links to my other books and to my blog and all that stuff, or a contact page if anyone wants to just reach out and contact me for any reason.
Fantastic. Well, Tom, thank you so much for joining us today. And the book is entitled The Business of Belief. And of course, we also talked about Sandbox Wisdom. And keep up the good work. I hope you're already thinking of your next book because we want to hear more about it, whatever it's going to be.
Well, thanks, Jason. Thank you. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Sometimes I think of Jason Hartman as a walking encyclopedia on the subject of creating wealth.
Well, you're probably not far off from the truth, Penny, because Jason actually has a 3-book set on creating wealth that comes with 60 digital download audios.
Yes, Jason has that unique ability to make you understand investing the way it should be. It's a world where anything less than 26% annual return is disappointing.
I love how he actually shows us how we can be excited about these scary times and exploit the incredible opportunities this present economy has afforded us.
We can pick local markets untouched by the economic downturn, exploit packaged commodities investing, and achieve exceptional returns safely and securely.
I also like how he teaches you to protect the equity in your home before it disappears and how to outsource your debt obligations to the government.
And the entire set of advanced strategies for wealth creation is being offered at a savings of $94.
That's right, and to get your Creating Wealth Encyclopedia series, complete with over 60 hours of audio and 3 books, just go to jasonhartman.com/store.
If you want to be able to sit back and collect checks every month, just like a banker, Jason's Creating Wealth Encyclopedia series is for you. This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company, all rights reserved. For distribution or publication rights and media interviews, please visit www.hartmanmedia.com or email media@hartmanmedia.com. Nothing on this show should be considered specific personal or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own, and the host is acting on behalf of Platinum Properties Investor Network, Inc. exclusively.